Good evening. I always enjoy watching the introduction to my own show because Bill Phelps and Brian Anderson did such a wonderful job of putting that open together for me. And that's why many times you will catch me with a smile on my face as we open the show. But I have other reasons for smiling because Steve Allen is my guest tonight. Steve is not a native Arizonan, but almost. He moved to Phoenix as a teenager because of his asthma, and the Chicago climate did not quite get along. He started his show business career in Phoenix as a radio disc jockey. And from there he went to New York City and tried his luck at the Big Apple. He was the first host of The Tonight Show many, many years ago. And on that show, two unknown singers made their debut, Steve Lawrence and Edie Garmay. The rest is history as far as they're concerned. Steve then went on to host a one-hour primetime variety show, and he introduced three comedians to the TV audience, Tom Poston, Louis Nye, and Don Knotts. And you may remember their memorable Man in the Street skits. He did a syndicated late-night talk show with his wife, Jane Meadows, and he, in his spare time, composes songs. He has written over 400 songs, as well as 22 books. He told us in this press conference that he likes to write a book a year. He writes, he produces, he directs, and he stars in his own shows. And in his spare time, he's politically active. We'd like you to meet Steve Allen after this commercial. Good evening to you out there, and good morning to you.
Whatever it is.
My guest, as you can easily see, is Steve Allen, and Steve is in town right now, and you will see this later.
I'm supposed to be in Cleveland. I'll see you later.
Why are you here, Steve?
Well, because I'm nailed to this chair. No, I'm seriously here to take part in the crime prevention and crime awareness fair. It's an issue in which, simply in my capacity as citizen, I've been interested in for a good many years. And whenever I am invited to, well, not whenever, because I'm not always available, but if I am available and I'm invited to a program of this sort, I'm very happy to take part in it.
I understand by a little birdie that you're spending over a day here, and the only expense involved to the City of Crime Fair is your plane ticket. And I want to thank you on behalf of...
Oh, thank you. Yeah, one doesn't take payment for this sort of thing. As I say, it's something you do as a citizen.
Why did you get involved in the crime issue? I know you've written a book.
Well, I think it's something that everyone cares about, and since I have access to public attention, and since I write books also for a living, I think one expresses oneself about something that you care about in any way that is available to you. It may seem odd that an entertainer would be interested in this, and perhaps it is, but I'm not here as an entertainer, I'm here as a citizen.
Would you tell us a little bit more about your book, Rip Off?
Yes, it's a study of white-collar crime and corruption. Came out quite a few months ago. I don't even know if it's available in your local stores. But I had noticed, beginning about 15 years ago, that the incidence of white-collar crime was increasing. Now, there's always been corruption. There always will be, I'm afraid. But the degree of it, I think, is unprecedented in our national experience. We cannot be content with any degree of it, and I think the problem must be addressed. I've discovered that most people are not aware that there is such a thing as this problem. Now, they know about local instances of corruption because they read about it in papers or TV or radio, but, and they hear about the cases from Washington, the Abscam case and that sort of thing, but they may tend to think it's only a problem in Tucson and Washington. It's not the case everywhere. There are no longer any exceptions. Rural areas, western areas that once were relatively untainted are now really in a deplorable state. And I'm an old Arizonan, as you may know, and I love the city of Tucson, but you have a very serious problem here with organized crime, people here, and, as I say, white-collar crime. And the reason this is morally significant is that We know about the organized criminals. They've been around for centuries. And we know about street crime, people driven by the desperation of poverty to do dreadful things. But we tend to think that white-collar people are above all that. And they certainly should be. Most of them are paid relatively well. But the last, just to go back, say, 25 years, there's been this tendency that just about any way you can get your hands on somebody else's money, short of armed robbery, is okay because, quote, everybody's doing it. Well, I don't know whether everybody's doing it or not, but it better stop.
Where do you get the goods on white-collar people, though?
Oh,
I mean, how do you get the goods on
Well,
them?
no one of us can get the goods on all the white-collar crooks, but very often you can, in your immediate experience, your immediate area, see instances of it and simply report the crimes to the police. Number one, don't take part in them. That would be a very good place to start. Number two, inform yourself. And number three, as I say, share information with law enforcement agencies. Now, you can do that, as I was saying earlier today, in a totally open way. If you want to, you can testify in court and so forth. Many people are reluctant to do that. Some of them are afraid. That's understandable. Therefore, you can establish a contact in which you are dealt with on a code name basis. And many cities in the country now are organizing such procedures to accommodate the receipt of such information.
Your attention, please. Your attention,
Guess
please.
somebody
We're getting
wants
there.
our attention.
5 minutes in the little theater.
Something will happen in 5 minutes in the Little Theater, folks. Sorry you missed it.
Guess we better wait.
In the old days when I used to do the Tonight Show live, we did it once a year from one or another of the big hotels, the resort hotels in Miami. And there were even nights when that happened right in the middle of the show because somebody would say, Mr. Hemmingman, needed near the swimming pool, please.
Princess, you mentioned how heavily organized crime is into Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
And I have lived here 20 years, been around a little bit. And I must honestly say to you that
You don't see it?
I don't know where it is. I've heard that, and I've heard that, and I've heard that, and I'd like to know who it is because I wouldn't do business with them, but I don't know where all this mafia money is.
Well, much of it is in the ownership of legitimate businesses now. These are people chiefly from New York, from Chicago, from Rochester, from St. Louis, from Las Vegas, from Kansas City, from all the cities where the boys have long been powerful, sometimes even dominant. And they make money, obviously, in illegal ways. And so a man just, gets off an airplane with about $1 million in a briefcase. I'm simplifying it here, of course. Sometimes the procedures are more sophisticated. So he buys a motel, or he buys 3 restaurants, and that's how it starts. Now, you might say, well, it would be nice if a man reformed himself and stopped being a criminal and just went into the laundry business, or the automobile sales business, and that would be nice, but that's not the way it works. These people don't retire. I don't know of any instance where a long-time mafia guy suddenly got religion or got morality, and I think I've just destroyed this cup. I better drink it here so it doesn't keep dripping on the table. Anyway, it's a very dreadfully serious problem. The local law enforcement agencies are aware of the names, and perhaps since you're in the media, they might give you the names of some. I think really somebody ought to print a list of all the restaurants, and as you say, people could stop eating there.
Stop eating there. To finish up, I wanted to ask you if you'd repeat the story you told at Mo Udall's dinner last night about when you lived in Phoenix.
Oh, yes. Well, I had lived in Phoenix in the early 40s, and then I got into television. And very quickly, it was during the Christmas season, I think around 1951, I was shopping in Macy's, and I suddenly saw a familiar face in the crowd. And this story has to do with keeping in touch with the folks back home and what can happen if you don't. So I suddenly saw this guy, and I thought, oh, I know him, and I don't know what the name is. And he knew me because I was on television then. So he said, hi, Steve. And I said, hi. He said, Nick Udall, And I said, oh, yes, Nick. I said, I recognize you right away. I said, what are you doing in town? He said, I'm here for the big game. I said, what game is that? He said, well, Brigham Young University is playing NYU at the Madison Square Garden. And I just happened to know Brigham Young University is in Provo, Utah. So I said, are you living up in Provo now? And he said, no, I'm still hanging around Phoenix. I said, what do you do there? He said, I'm the mayor. So I was naturally very embarrassed. And in trying to back out of the conversation gracefully, my mind was clicking politics in Arizona. I said, hey, whatever happened to that other announcer? Because I'd been an announcer in the old days. I said, that buddy of mine in the other station, KTAR, I said, he was sort of getting interested in politics. He said, you mean Howard Pyle? I said, that's the name. What's old Howard doing now? He said, he's the governor. So I've kept a little closer track since then.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Tucson Press was out in full glory to interview Steve Allen at a press conference. Most of the questions centered around his book, Rip Off, and organized crime, and why he had come to the crime fair. But many of the questions were on the actors' strike, which has paralyzed the network TV schedule for the fall. We'll let you share in this press conference right now.
The most detrimental effect that organized crime has on the average citizen?
Well, we pay more for things when organized crime gets into the act. Honest business people are often frozen out or forced out, threatened out, and then occasionally people are killed. So there are various ways in which our society pays the price. It also corrupts the whole political process in many communities, not all, because ultimately where the organized criminals, I'm talking about the top level, the people they make the movies about, when they are successful in a big way, which is all too often the case, they cannot be that successful without political accomplices, without lenient judges, without corrupt legislators and so forth. And so that's also something that rots the soul of a nation. They corrupt the whole process. I'm afraid some of us are running around saying, corrupt me, But it would be a little slower if we didn't have the pressure from them. They run the narcotics business, as you know. And I understand that there are hundreds of airplane pilots who probably think they're law-abiding, although I'm sure not many of them do anymore, in this one state, who can pick up enormous sums of money simply by flying private planes down to Mexico, bringing in a load of drugs of one sort or another. So this is another way in which just one group, the airline pilots, can be corrupted, and it's happening in very many areas.
One more question. Why did you choose to not support the Actors Guild strike?
Your question is based on an unwarranted assumption. I served as the host of the Emmy Awards telecast, and one of the very first things I said the other evening when I walked on stage was that I firmly support the strike. It's quite all right. It's on that point.
What do you think about actors that refuse to host this show because they were trying to...
They, as I also said on the air the other night, they have my wholehearted respect. One does what one can. I took part in the show for a number of reasons. I perceived it as a management enterprise, and I thought the actors' point of view ought to be represented. They paid me $10,000 for my services, and I turned it over immediately to the Screen Actors Guild Emergency Strike Fund. Couldn't have done that if I stayed home.
Do we know enough about those kinds of technologies to order to make a fair and honest settlement that could be pleasing to both producers and performers?
Well, whenever there's any important controversy, as you know, the result is, at least in free societies, is always a compromise, and generally neither side is terribly pleased by it. They both walk away from the deal somewhat disgruntled. The union usually doesn't get what it wanted, as much as it wanted, I should say, and the management group is bugged that it has to give up anything. But nevertheless, that's the way free societies work out such controversial confrontations.
Do you think we know enough about future television technologies in order to make a reasonable adjustment? Do we know enough about future cassette sales, or really where this business is headed, in order to say, yes, this will be fair for the actor to receive this much, or producers ought to be able to pay this much?
No, I think you're absolutely right. We don't, well, first of all, we don't know enough about anything, but in that case, the future is notoriously unavailable to us. So it's very difficult to be rational about the future. We're lucky if we can be rational about the present. But you raise a very, very important philosophical question. I think one of the reasons, and I don't consider myself, by the way, an expert on the issues in negotiation. They're far more complex than the average person understands and that I understand. But there have been some stories in the show business and even the popular media the last year or two where people who had 10%, 20% of enormously successful films that made 30, 40, 50 million dollars. Now you'd think, boy, I've got 10% of a picture that I'm sitting pretty. In some cases, these people haven't seen a penny yet because they had a percentage of the profits. And of course, there are the profits, but bookkeeping also can be a very arcane science, as you know. And I think that's why the attempt is being made to get percentages of the gross, so that whatever monies you have coming to you, assuming you have any money coming to you, you won't have to wait around for 2 or 3 years of questionable bookkeeping to find out maybe that there isn't any after all. You know?
And the other part of that is that having a lot of actors felt that, I mean, I Love Lucy, is still running everywhere in the world. And although Lucille Ball made a great deal of money off that, perhaps that she should have made even more buying residuals.
Yes, and there were, as you know, being in the business, the even sadder stories. Our next-door neighbor for years before they moved away recently was Gail Storm. She had 2 hit series that are still being seen here and there, and she never got a penny from them outside of her weekly salary, which was quite modest. So people going on making money up from that oil well from now on, and as I say, Gail Storm never saw a penny and never was entitled to any because of the contractual terms.
Can you tell me about your comedy special?
I'm doing 6 comedy specials for NBC, and in fact did 3 for them just recently, so it will be a total of 9 this year. Those 3 were within the context of a series called The Big Show. Same general kind of comedy I've been doing for the last 31 years on television.
Before we leave tonight, I'd like to share with you some of the guests that I'm going to have on future shows. We've already taped some of them, and I'll tell you about the ones that have really turned out well. We're going to do a show on meditation, and we will have the Swami Shantananda on. We will talk about him, a real live Swami, but we'll also talk about meditation and the wave that's sweeping the country and the various forms of meditation. We will, after that, do a political series because, as you know, a very important election is right around the corner. We will all elect a senator and a member of the House of Representatives and determine the future of the country for many years to come because these people will be involved in major legislation that is pending. So we will be doing a half hour each with Barry Goldwater, Mo Udall, Richard Huff, and Bill Schultz. And we hope this will help you decide whom you want to vote for. We've recently done a show with Angela Davis that we will be showing to you. It was very interesting to interview her and how she has mellowed out over the 10 years span that she was in trouble with the law and later acquitted of all the charges. Very interesting person, still a rebel, still a renegade, but a little more mellow at this point. We've done a very interesting show on the National Sex Forum. And I had 2 guests, Dr. Ted McElveny and Dr. Wardell Pomeroy. Dr. Pomeroy was one of the people who worked with Dr. Kinsey on the original sex surveys that started a trend towards finding out what makes people tick sexually in this country. And we also have another show coming up with Carol Shaw, editor of Big Beautiful Woman magazine, and Allison Hughes, who will be talking about the UN International Mid-Decade Women's Conference in Copenhagen, Denmark. So please be with us on Saturday nights at 9:30 for Talk It Over.